Welcome to the EntrePastors podcast on YouTube. This is a show that helps pastors think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs. Well, hello and welcome to the EntrePastors podcast on YouTube. Hey, my name is Jon Sanders. I'm one of the co-hosts here of the show, and I just want to say thank you so much to each and every one of you who listen to this podcast, whether you're listening just to the audible version that's on all of the different podcast platforms out there, or whether you're watching us via video here on YouTube. Man, we're grateful to have you in our community. And this episode that you're getting ready to listen to or to watch, episode 39, you're going to hear myself and my co-host, Les Hughes, unpack what we're calling 6 components of a fail-proof business plan. If you're a pastor that's really interested in getting started in the marketplace with some kind of entrepreneurial business of your own, there's some things that we can share with you that will help you go farther faster. Okay, in this episode, you're going to hear me and Les really kind of share a little bit of the behind the scenes of the story of this platform, EntrePastors, the podcast, the membership community, the mastermind, and just some of the business principles that we have employed along the way to make this thing become successful. And so we believe that these principles apply to any business plan, and that if you adhere to these, that you will be successful in whatever business endeavor you have. So we're excited about what we're getting ready to share with you in this episode. Without any further ado, let's cut to this conversation that I had recently with Les Hughes on 6 components of a fail-proof business plan. Check this out. Today, we're going to kind of peel back the layers a little bit, or peel back the curtain, so to speak, and let people take a behind-the-scenes look at the world of our business, EntrePastors. We figure, this is a business that you and I are building together, and we're encouraging other pastors to show up in the world as profitable entrepreneurs. So we're okay just being vulnerable and transparent and letting people kind of see our journey as it evolves and as it unfolds. So you ready to get vulnerable?
I don't know. Are we sure that's what about people that may be competitors out there, Jon?
Man, well, first of all, this was your idea, so I hope you're ready. Now you're bringing up objections as we're recording it. But no, seriously, I don't see it as competitors. If someone is in a similar space, as a matter of fact, we're going to have them as a guest, someone doing a very similar service for pastors, and I know of others as well. An abundance mindset doesn't see it as competition. It says, there's room, plenty of room for all of us in the pool, and there's plenty.
You're welcome. I teed it up for you, nice and pretty for you to hit it out of the park, and you did a great job.
Yeah, first I thought you were raising an objection after we hit record. I'm like, seriously, Les, this whole thing was your idea. So no, this is going to be fun. Here's how we're going to approach this. We're just going to share 6 lessons kind of that you and I have learned or maybe applied. I don't know. I wouldn't say we've learned them all as a part of this, but we are applying these lessons and learning them. And really, if someone does the 6 things that we're talking about in this show, we can honestly say you will have a fail-proof business plan. We can make that promise. And so as we go through these, we'll just unpack a little bit of the story of what has been EntrePastors. We're not even a full year into this. We're coming up on it this summer, but it's been a fun ride so far. So number 1, I'll tell you what, I'll tee them up and then you can give some commentary. How does that sound, Les? Is that a good plan?
Sounds good. Yep.
All right. So lesson number 1, if you want to have a fail-proof business plan, you need to set some goals and have a plan, right? It's hard to have a fail-proof plan if there's no plan to begin with. So set some goals and have a plan. How did we do that, Les?
Well, you have to start from somewhere. And so it really began for us when we began thinking about what are some of the ideal results in this venture for us. And I think it was probably Stephen Covey that first made popular the phrase, start with the end in mind. And a lot of people have their versions, but there's a lot of truth to that. There's a reason that it's repeated so much, whether it's, it's bad form. If I'm shooting a bow and arrow, it's bad form to just shoot it at a wooden fence and then go and take a Sharpie and draw around it and say, I hit the bullseye. Mm-hmm. Start with the bullseye first, and then you have something to shoot for. We're not always going to hit it. And we might even move that target may move here and there. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but you have to start somewhere. And John, don't you think that some people never get started because they really don't know where that goal line is?
Yeah, and it just kind of keeps them paralyzed and so they don't get moving. Or the other extreme of that would be kind of like you said with that metaphor of shooting the arrow and then going and drawing your target around it is they kind of just drift, but they don't really have a plan on purpose of where they're drifting to. They just are kind of justifying how they ended up where they got, but they didn't really get there on purpose as a result of a plan. So if you're going to start a business, we highly encourage you to have some goals. Why are you starting that business? What is it you're hoping to accomplish? What is it that you are wanting that business to do for you, for your family? Who are you wanting to serve with and through that business? And then what's kind of the plan to get started? We think it's a good idea. When you and I started EntrePastors, I mean, we didn't have like a 5-page business plan, but we had an idea of where we were going and why we were going there and who we wanted to serve. So we did that. We have goals, even as early as this year, we sat down together at the beginning of the year and mapped out what are our goals for this business for 2022. And as we were saying a minute ago before we hit record, those are going to change because I hope a few years from now, we're not celebrating the same goals that we had this year. I hope we look back with fond memories going, remember when that was our goal? And we've accomplished that. Now we're on to new goals. So,
And when I hear people, John, that we respect, mentors or people that have their own podcasts or um, a conference or something that we may go to, a course that we may invest in, I want to hear not only the principles, the ideals or the philosophies behind it. I want to hear the practical stuff that somebody did to actually move the needle. And so in this episode, one of the things that we'll be doing, we're going to talk about the things that we actually did that ended up moving the needle, or maybe it showed us the way that we shouldn't be doing it in the future. And that's okay too. We're learning as we go. So one of the things that I remember in those early days were we really asked the question, what do we really, first of all, who do we want to help? And that pretty quickly we said, we want to help pastors who are living in scarcity right now, or people with a ministry background. They're living in scarcity, living paycheck to paycheck, really struggling and anxious because they don't know really how they're going to provide for their families, even either now or long term. So that could look like a lot of things, but it was a lot. When we had that clarity, that really helped us know some of the next steps that we needed to take, and then some of the ones that we didn't need to take. And if somebody just has a really hard time in deciding where to get started, or what if they have 5 things in mind and they need to choose one, then later on in the show we can share that resource that we have that's absolutely free, that can just be a prompter for them to get the ball moving to take some sort of action.
Yeah, well, because I know how you and I work, Les, we're going to forget if we don't do that
Give
right
it.
now. So that's entrepastors.com/start. All right. That's the free get started guide. And we may remember to say it at the end, but likely you and I will forget.
And John, I'm probably you too. We get emails or some kind of notification every day without us even promoting it, that people are going and getting that free resource where they found it somewhere, they've seen it on our website or heard a podcast or talked to a friend. So I know that that's resonating with a lot of people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that leads us to the next thing. Like once you've set some goals and have a plan, this is probably where I see a lot of people, their business plan falls apart with this number 2, and that is take action. Because some people want to set some goals and have a plan and then tweak the plan and then tweak it again and then edit it some more and then talk about it and then, vision board it and then, mind map it. And they love doing all of that because it keeps them from the next thing. And that is taking action. Les, when you and I finally said go on this project, we've not stopped. I mean, we have taken a tremendous amount of action, and I'm just going to let our listeners in on a little secret. I was busy with my own business when Les and I connected and we talked about this. And so for me, I was kind of like, yeah, that it's a good idea. Maybe someday we should do that someday down the road. Well, Les, it was your initial actions that really pushed me into this. I blame you for this entire mess because
Great.
you went and got a logo made up and you went and started like taking those steps of action. And I realized, like, man, the train's leaving the station. I better jump on this thing and be a part of it. So I don't say that with any ill will. I'm grateful for the action you took, because if you had not taken that initial step of action, I probably would have been content to just let it sit there for a few more months. Maybe we'd still be sitting there today. So you got to take action. What would you add to that?
Yeah, I would amen it for sure. I read a book, it's been probably a couple of years now, but it just really made an impact on me, called The One Thing. The author's name's Gary Keller. I would recommend it to anybody, especially if you're a procrastinator by nature or tend to be a perfectionist, which in some ways is just another word for a procrastinator. Well, that's a different episode probably. But if that's you, then you want to get this book, The One Thing. It's by Gary Keller. And I'm paraphrasing, but this is pretty close to a quote. I've read this book a couple of times. And as we talk about this, I've resolved in my mind to go back and start it again, because it's just that profound. And the phrase that he mentions over and over is, what is the one thing that I can do? Like the one action step I can take, that by doing it makes everything else either easier or unnecessary. Because what can happen is, especially those early days, I mean, there's a lot of things that we could have done, John. But one thing we did was we decided on what the purpose was going to be, even before we had a name for this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we played around with a few names, like, what do we want to call this? And I don't know, EntrePastors sounded good. Pastorpreneur was too hard to say. So we went out there and absolutely. And so we went out there and looked around, and that was available. And so we jumped on it. And also, by the way, we did talk to several people about what we were doing and the ideas that we had. And that term seemed to strike a chord with a lot of people. It was interesting, a little bit fun. Then we got the domain. And then within days, John, we recorded that first talk about taking action.
Yeah.
Because of your background in podcasting, that was low hanging fruit for us. You had the wherewithal, the know-how to do it. We got an account, and that was rolling. And so it was just one thing, and we sort of began to stack stuff. But it was that idea of the one thing that really got us going.
I'll remind you of this, Les. Part of the rush to get a podcast out the door was because we had also set a date for our very first live event, because we were going to be gathered with our mastermind that we're a part of down in Florida. And we thought, hey, let's just do a live event, because that had a date and a time, set for it. So I was like, well, if we're going to market this, we better build a podcast and build an audience to be able to market that event too. And so, I mean, I think we took action almost to a fault. And what I mean by that is, maybe others would have said, hey, you're moving too fast. You're taking too much action. But I will say this, and I'm if it's bragging, I guess it is. But one thing that I've usually been pretty reliable in, and that's taking action. Some people may look at it and call it being impulsive, or I call it being decisive. But I rarely struggle with analysis paralysis. A minute ago, Les, you mentioned perfectionism, and we won't go deep into that, but I do just want to point out two things. One is perfectionism in many ways is just fear masking itself as something, laudable, or something. That's a big word to use, laudable. What's another word for laudable? It's, something praiseworthy, like, hey, I just want it to be perfect. Well, sometimes that perfection is really just fear keeping you from moving forward and taking action. Another thing, you mentioned a book, and that's great. We'll probably mention a few more books before this show is done. But what I also want to say under this heading of taking action is, sometimes we also trick ourselves into thinking that if I just learn more, that's taking action. So Les said a book. Now I need to go read that book. Yeah, read the book, but don't stop moving forward. Like, take action, because sometimes I see people just spinning their wheels, taking another course, reading another book. I need to go through another program, when what you really need to do is take action, because you and I just started moving the ball down the field, and something emerged from that. A business started to come out of that. Paying customers started to come out of that action we were taking. So number 2, take action. So we've set goals, we have a plan, we're taking action. Now, number 3, get the right people around you. And Les, there's a couple angles we can look at this from. One is, let's just talk about you and me for a moment and our partnership, because this is the first time I've ever built a business with a partner up to this point, all my other business endeavors have just kind of been my own thing. There's pros and cons to both, but why don't you talk a little bit about how you and I, work together in a partnership? And have you ever been in a partnership beyond this one?
One other time with a very good friend of mine, but it wasn't in this space. I was in a partnership where we bought some houses and renovated them and fixed them up and flipped them. So we didn't work near as closely day to day as what you and I do, because those were projects that were kind of on again, off again. We hired contractor and all that. So technically, yes, but very, very different.
Well,
This is
real
the first
quick,
time.
have you heard that partnerships are often discouraged? Like, have you, because I've heard that
Yeah.
in business, like people discourage you from a partnership. So how did you push through that voice of, hey, be careful about going into this with a business partner?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, John. I think some of it is just there is an element of faith that's involved. I think in our world, it's easier to do homework on somebody and background on somebody that has any kind of a footprint, social footprint at all, and so we were both able to do some homework. We both also happen to be fairly discerning people, and I think if we would have seen red flags, because I've had conversations with people before about collaborating or things of that nature, and I think if red flags would have come up, or if we would have had a conversation with somebody where there was a question in character, we would have picked up on that, and probably, at least I would have, and I think you would have, politely sort of backed off of it. So I think there's ways to do that, to look at, see what the other person has produced. I listened to your podcast. I liked your message. I really liked your voice. You seemed very genuine to me, and from my end, at least, that's how I overcame some of that.
Do you still think that now as
We'll
we've been
we'll, we'll
working?
talk we'll talk offline, but
Okay, good. I hope that's good. But yeah,
my
and
my opinion has not changed. It's your status has only gone up, bro.
oh, sweet. All right. Well, that means a lot to me. But, I had heard that whole thing about, be careful with partnerships. And there's probably wisdom to that. There's probably a lot of train wreck stories out there involving partnerships. So, it was pretty quickly in the story that you and I, as we launched an LLC, we actually, invested in an attorney to draw that up. And because of the partnership, like there's probably a few more moving parts than just a normal sole proprietor, single member LLC. So we invested in those attorney fees and made that happen, and so I felt very comfortable being in a partnership with you, and I've not regretted that. I feel like it's that getting the right people around you. Like, could I have done this on my own? Probably, sure, and you could have too. But I feel like we've been able to do so much more together because of how we complement one another and just not having the sole responsibility. You and I both, as many EntrePastors do, we have our feet in multiple worlds, right? And so in this case, it is helpful to have somebody in a partnership that can sometimes hold down the fort. And we've done that for one another. And we'll continue to do that in our business where we can kind of fill in the gaps where needed. One time someone asked us the question, I don't even remember where it was, but they said, so, what dynamics do you, Jon and Les, bring to EntrePastors? How is your partnership unique? And my gut reaction that kind of rolled off my tongue was white collar, blue collar. I mean, that's one way of thinking about Les being. I'll let the audience guess who's white collar, blue collar here. But you've got Dr. Les Hughes and then Jon Sanders, who has an associate's degree in fire science. And anyway, I just feel like we complement each other pretty well. Our styles are a little different and unique, and yet there's a lot of similarities. And so, you and I are the right people in partnership, but we also could talk about this from the angle of a team and not doing all the work ourselves. You and I have been impacted by a book written by Dan Sullivan. I'll let you speak about this a little bit less, but it's been kind of a driving principle behind us building a team. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that book would be Who, Not How. And I would recommend that for everybody that's listening, no matter what sort of team that you have, official or unofficial, paid or volunteer. Nobody goes through life alone. We just don't. So there are ways to go about that strategically. So ideally, what would happen, by the way, this is not what happened with you and me. Ideally, what would happen is it would be wise to partner with someone who has a much different skill set for example, normally there's one person who's more of a 35,000 foot visionary, and then the other person in the partnership is more on the ground war, the ground game, can think in a straight line and put steps together and does the details. Well, as it turns out, you and I both are wired more as the visionary. We've both served as senior pastors, which is kind of, it goes along with the role, and then bring along team members to implement that strategy or that vision, whatever it is. So what we needed to do, since both of us are more comfortable in that role, there are different skills that you and I have that we just enjoy more. You enjoy the deliverable or the medium of podcasting more. I really, really like it, but I haven't done it as long as you have. I'm not as prolific at it as you are. Your voice is, it's just different. I think you're a great podcast host, and I listen to a lot of them. You have written some, you've published things just like I have, but I just enjoy the process of research and writing. I think it's fair to say more than you do.
Yep.
And that part, it really benefits our business and what we're doing. But we didn't know that, day one. We just had to discover that along the way. That was something that I'm thankful that God put it together. But
Yeah.
it still left us at a place where we needed that ground game person. We needed that person to make it happen, and we went out and found her.
Yeah, and pretty early in the story, we brought there's a book, I think it's called Rocket Fuel, if I recall, and it
Yes.
uses those terms visionary and integrator. And yeah, Les, as you said, you and I are both very much visionaries, and that we could get in a lot of mess with that real quick, with you and me getting together, getting excited about ideas, and then we walk away going, "Oh, now wait, when were we going to do that?" And it never happens without that integrator to kind of bring you back down to earth and go, "Okay, great ideas, love them all, but now how do we actually put that on the calendar, and what are the steps to accomplishing that?" So we did. You reached out to someone in our world that is a phenomenal integrator, and she's been a huge part of our team, even though she's not heard from a lot from our audience, but she's a huge part behind the scenes, and also utilizing the assistant of some different virtual assistants along the way. And so again, it's that principle of who, not how. Like if this was just Jon and Les sitting around going, "How do we get this all done?" We would be making a big mess of things, and
And
we
our
would be
CFO,
wasting
John,
time. Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
we've
even
got
the
a
financial
CFO.
part of it, oh my goodness, to early on to put together a good structure. And I can't speak I'll just speak for me. I didn't do that early enough in my other business ventures. And even as a young married person, those early days. So the fact that we brought in a team member to do that from the get-go, who we knew and could trust, and that was huge. And everybody, please listen, we're not talking about full-time staff here.
Right,
Okay. We couldn't do that early on,
right.
but we were able to utilize, so we just got creative in how we would take care of those people.
Absolutely. So we are where we are today because of the fact that we have people around us. We have a team. And, there's a statement that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. I think this is an old African proverb, or maybe it's a fortune cookie or something. But if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's what we're doing. We have a big vision for where we see this going and the number of lives that can be impacted. And so it's going to require us to go together and not just run fast alone. So yeah, we've got a team, and we're grateful for that. So the fourth thing, number 4, another component of a fail-proof business plan: accept the fact that we're all in sales. This may sound kind of weird to talk about because it's like, well, yeah, duh, it's business, but especially to pastors, especially to people with more of a ministry mindset, because of so much of the narrative that we've been told, and really some flawed relationship we have with money much of the time. We get squeamish when it comes to the whole money thing and the whole icky, I have to sell this stuff. But the reality is we're all in sales. So Les, I'll let you speak some more to that.
Mm, we could do another whole episode on sales. We should
Probably
probably
should.
do that at some point. But the fact is that we are all in sales. It doesn't always feel like sales to you, but if there's ever anything you do that involves persuasion, Selling is persuasion. Persuasion is selling. If ever had a toddler and he or she does not want to eat their Brussels sprouts, okay, or their green beans, you got to persuade them to do it. That's selling. The difference that where people start feeling kind of squeamish and icky, John, is that they're trying to persuade someone to spend money on something that they themselves may not really believe in, or they may not actually believe that the person really does need that. But when you've got something that you know is worth what you're the worth the exchange of resources, okay, and you know that it's going to benefit maybe in a huge way the person on the other end of that relationship, let's call it a transaction for now, then you don't hesitate to put that out there because you know that it's going to improve that other person's life. And we genuinely feel that way about our membership in EntrePastors, our mastermind, the different resources we have, a live event that we might have. Those things, if we were just to give all of that away, just give it, give it, give it, give it, then we could do it for a few weeks and then we'd be done.
Yep.
We'd be, or we can continue to invest and allow other people to do the same, giving them at least as much value, hopefully more, and I do believe more value than what is being invested in the same way that you and I have countless times to get the results that we've received.
You know what, Les, you've inspired me with that thought about we're going to do a whole episode on this one lesson alone about selling. And so we had some more stuff we were going to say under this, but for now, we'll just suffice it to say what we've said, except the fact that we're all in sales. If you're not in sales, you're not going to be in business for very long. So we're going to do a whole episode in the near future as a spinoff of this one about selling, because there's some things within our EntrePastors journey that we are continuing to evolve and work on in when it comes to our products and what it is we're selling. So we've got some books we'll recommend, but yeah, we'll do a whole show on that. I like that idea. So good thought, Les. All right, number 5. Let's move on to number 5. Here's another huge part of a fail-proof business plan, and that is be willing to pivot. Be willing to pivot. So the reality is this: you have no way of knowing when you start a business exactly where it's going to go. And it's very likely that your where you end up is going to look a little different than what you had in mind at the beginning. There's going to be some twists and turns along the way, and you need to be willing to pivot. Les, say more about that.
We've seen this so many times already. There's a difference between pivoting or modifying what we're doing. There's a difference in that and what's often referred to as a shiny object syndrome. Shiny object syndrome is where you have a hard time focusing and you're distracted by everything in the world. And so nothing ever, you don't give anything enough time to really get established and bear fruit because you're jumping around, That's not what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. What we're talking about is as you go and as you're taking those actions, as you're meeting other people along the way, really looking carefully at the doors that seem to be opening and check them out. The whole reason that EntrePastors Press exists and the reason that you're going to be seeing many books with our brand, with our label, is because of a relationship that we have with a member of our mastermind group, David Hancock. David is the CEO of Morgan James, and he has the same heart for people in ministry as we do. He's a very good book publisher. He and his team have a hard time checking out all the proposals and pitches that they get. And so David had a conversation with us like, what if? In addition to that, he knows that we're writing a book about this whole process as well. So I would just say, and by the way, the writing and the publishing venture is a longer game. It takes a little bit of time, but you're going to start seeing these things roll out, these titles roll out here in the next few months. And that's something that we would have never thought day one. But we were open to it, had our eyes open. And just what you said a minute ago was so true. I would say to everybody, what your business looks like in a year or 2 or 5 is probably going to be very different than you think it will, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and just roll with the evolution as it comes along. Roll with those changes and be willing to listen to the people around you, the mentors speaking into your life and business, the customers that you're serving. They'll all kind of help shape the direction you go, and it may move a little differently than what you thought. But we continue to pivot with EntrePastors, and we're not even a year old. So I promise when we're 5, 10, 15 years looking back over our shoulder, we'll see a lot of pivot points along the way where we adjusted, and I'm looking forward to the journey. So finally, number 6, and this is huge, and this is what makes it a fail-proof business plan. Number 6 is don't give up. All the other stuff we've talked about is great and it's good and it'll help move your business forward. But if you quit, your business will fail. And so we want to challenge our listeners, regardless of what your business is, don't give up. Now, there is a caveat I'm going to throw onto this, but Les, before we do that, I'll just let you say anything about this that you want to say.
Yeah, there are several ways to say this. One of the ways that we say it is you're either growing or you're learning. But if you don't get the results that you hope to get, that doesn't mean that that has failed. And we could talk about all the failures, if you want to call it that, all of the tests of the light bulb that didn't work the way Thomas Edison wanted them to until he finally got it right. He could have quit anywhere along the way and struck that up as a failure. Whatever that was, 1,000, however many it was in the story, they weren't failures, man. He learned something from every single one of them. The only way that you can fail at this is to quit. So I would just say, man, don't quit, don't stop, but keep moving forward, keep taking action, and then learn from the actions that you take.
Absolutely. The only caveat I wanted to add to that was that sometimes there does come a point where quitting is a good thing, right? Like where it is time to, but it's not failing. It's we're moving forward. We're going to move into a new thing, a new season. So what we're really challenging you with this is don't quit too soon. Don't quit before you've given it enough time for things to really take off and grow. But successful people quit things all the time. So there is kind of a flip side to that coin that sometimes successful people do know when to say enough is enough and it's time to walk away. But make that decision very carefully and make sure you're walking in a good group of mentors or coaches that are speaking into your life, because it's possible that when you want to quit, it might be right about the time that breakthrough's coming for your business and you quit too soon. So there's wisdom and discernment will help you know the difference between, am I quitting too soon, or, is it time to move into something else and call this thing complete? But well, that's all the time we've got for this week's episode. I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in and listening. In our backstage, Les, you and I are going to share one more part of this fail-proof business plan for those that are our backstage subscribers. So stick around and we'll be back there in just a moment. But before we sign off, we want to encourage you. First of all, thank you for being listeners to this show. And we want to encourage you, if you find this content valuable and helpful, man, you could help us by sharing it with others. Leave a rating and review of the show on the iTunes library there and share it with other pastors that you know. Put it on your social media. However you can help us get the word out, we'd be super grateful for that. Anything else, Les, from you?
No, it's well said. Go online and get that start, that entrepastors.com/start if you want to get help getting started. And if you're already in the midst of this thing and you're growing it and you want to reach out to us just to bounce some ideas off of us, man, feel free to shoot us an email.
Fantastic. Good hanging out with you this week, Les. All the best to you guys. We'll talk to you again next week. Take care. Well, hey, thanks for watching this episode of the EntrePastors podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we release a new episode. If you'd like to get connected to other pastors who are learning to think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs, then we invite you to check us out on Facebook. Just search for the EntrePastors Connect group, answer a few of our simple questions there, and we'd love to include you in the conversations. And if you're really ready to go to the next level, then we invite you to join our EntrePastors membership community. When you become a monthly subscriber, you will receive access to courses, exclusive community, and coaching that will help you along in your own EntrePastors journey. If there's anything else we can do to serve you, please visit us at entrepastors.com, and we will do our best to serve you there God bless everybody. See you soon.